The morning mist clung to the Welsh valleys like a gentle embrace as William stood at the window of his hotel room in Cardiff. His fingers traced the cool glass while his mind wandered to the speech he would deliver in just a few hours. The weight of responsibility sat heavy on his shoulders, not just as a future king, but as a husband who desperately wanted to support his wife through one of her most challenging periods. Catherine had been fighting her battle with such grace and dignity that it took his breath away. The cancer diagnosis had shaken their entire family to its core, but watching her maintain her composure, her smile, and her dedication to their children had only deepened his admiration for the woman he had fallen in love with all those years ago at university. Now, as she prepared for what would be her most significant public appearance since her treatment began, William knew that his words today could help pave the way for her triumphant return. The invitation to speak at the Welsh Cultural Heritage Foundation had arrived months ago, but its timing now felt almost prophetic. William had spent weeks crafting his speech, working late into the night after putting the children to bed, carefully choosing each word to convey not just his love for Wales and its people, but also his deep respect for resilience in the face of adversity. He wanted to speak about courage without being obvious, about hope without seeming desperate, and about the strength that comes from community support during the darkest hours. His private secretary knocked gently on the door, reminding him that the car would be ready in 30 minutes. William nodded, straightening his tie and taking one last look at his notes. The speech was memorized, but holding the papers gave him comfort, like a security blanket that connected him to the hours of thoughtful preparation he had invested in this moment. As the royal convoy made its way through the Welsh countryside, William's thoughts drifted to the phone call he had shared with Catherine the night before. Her voice had carried that familiar warmth, but he could detect the underlying nervousness about her upcoming appearance at the Christmas carol service. It would be her first major public event since beginning treatment, and, while the medical team had given their approval, William knew that the emotional weight of the moment would be significant for both of them. Catherine had always been his anchor, the steady presence who could calm his nerves before any public appearance. Now, he found himself in the position of being her source of strength, and the responsibility felt both humbling and empowering. Their roles had shifted in subtle but meaningful ways throughout her treatment, with William taking on more of the day-to-day responsibilities with their children and becoming more protective of their family's privacy than ever before. The venue came into view, a beautiful stone building that had stood for centuries, weathering countless storms and celebrations. William felt a connection to the permanence of the structure, thinking about how it had witnessed generations of Welsh families facing their own trials and triumphs. Today, he would add his voice to the countless stories that had been shared within these walls, stories of love, loss, hope, and healing. The crowd that had gathered was larger than expected, with people of all ages waiting patiently behind the barriers. William could see the genuine affection in their faces, the way they smiled and waved not just at his title, but at him as a person they had watched grow from a young man into a husband and father. These were the moments that reminded him why public service mattered, why the institution of monarchy could still be relevant in the modern world when it focused on bringing people together and offering comfort during difficult times. Inside the building, William was greeted by local dignitaries and community leaders who had worked tirelessly to organize the event. He took time to speak with each person, asking about their families, their work, and their connection to the Welsh heritage they were celebrating. These conversations always energized him, reminding him that behind every public appearance were real people with real stories, real struggles, and real hopes for the future. The speech was scheduled to begin at 2 o'clock, and, as the time approached, William felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded any major address. But this time was different. This time, he carried with him not just his own hopes for a successful event, but his deep love for Catherine and his desire to create a moment that would somehow make her upcoming appearance a little easier, a little more supported by the groundswell of public affection he hoped to generate. As he was introduced to the audience, William took a deep breath and stepped forward to the podium. The room fell silent, hundreds of faces turned toward him with expectation and warmth. He thought of Catherine, probably at home with their children, maybe watching on television or simply going about her day with that quiet strength that had become even more remarkable over the past months. The first words came easily, flowing from his heart rather than from his prepared text. William spoke about the beauty of Wales, about the resilience of its people, and about the way communities could come together to support one another through the most challenging circumstances. He talked about tradition and continuity, but also about adaptation and growth, themes that resonated deeply with his own family's current journey. The audience was captivated, hanging on his every word as William painted a picture of hope and healing that felt both personal and universal. He spoke about the way crisis could reveal the very best in people, how it could strip away pretense and reveal the authentic bonds of love and loyalty that truly mattered. Without ever mentioning Catherine's illness directly, he managed to convey a message of support for anyone facing their own battles, anyone who needed to know they were not alone. As he continued speaking, William felt a connection to the audience that went beyond his usual public appearances. There was an intimacy to the moment, a shared understanding that transcended the formal nature of royal protocol. He was speaking not just as a prince, but as a man who had learned profound lessons about love, sacrifice, and the preciousness of each day shared with the people who mattered most. The speech built toward its conclusion with William talking about the approaching Christmas season, about the way the holidays could bring both joy and reflection, both celebration and quiet moments of gratitude. He spoke about the importance of gathering together, of creating memories that would last long after the decorations were packed away and the carols had faded from memory. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, but more than that, it was heartfelt. William could see tears in many eyes, could feel the emotional connection he had hoped to create. As he shook hands and exchanged words with audience members afterward, he heard story after story of people who had found strength in his words, who felt inspired to face their own challenges with renewed hope. The drive back to London felt different than the journey to Wales. William sat in the backseat of the car, replaying moments from the speech and thinking about the phone call he would make to Catherine as soon as he arrived home. He wanted to tell her about the warmth of the Welsh people, about their genuine concern and affection for their family, and about how ready the public seemed to welcome her back with open arms. More than anything, William felt that he had accomplished something meaningful today. Not just in terms of royal duty or public relations, but in terms of love. He had used his platform, his voice, and his position to create a foundation of support that would hopefully make Catherine's return to public life feel less daunting and more like a homecoming. The Christmas carol service was still weeks away, but already William felt that they had taken the first crucial step toward making it the triumphant moment Catherine deserved. The warm glow of the evening lights welcomed William home as his car pulled through the gates of their residence. The familiar sight of Catherine's silhouette in the kitchen window filled him with a sense of peace that no amount of public acclaim could match. She was preparing dinner, her movements graceful and purposeful despite everything she had endured over the past months. William paused for a moment before entering, simply watching the woman who had become his entire world navigate the simple, beautiful routine of caring for their family. Catherine looked up as he entered, her smile brightening the room in a way that the carefully arranged lighting never could. Without saying a word, she moved into his arms, and William held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair and feeling the tension of the day melt away. They stood like that for several minutes, not needing words to communicate the depth of their connection or the relief they both felt at being together again. Over dinner, William shared every detail of the Welsh event with Catherine, describing the faces in the crowd, the warmth of their reception, and the way his words had seemed to resonate with people who were facing their own struggles. Catherine listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and laughing at his impressions of some of the local officials he had met. But William could see something else in her eyes, a mixture of gratitude and apprehension that spoke to the weight she was carrying about her upcoming public appearance. Their children chattered excitedly about their day, completely unaware of the deeper currents running between their parents. William found himself marveling at their resilience, the way they had adapted to the changes in their routine without losing their sense of security or joy. Catherine had worked so hard to maintain normalcy for them, never letting her treatment interfere with bedtime stories, homework help, or weekend adventures. Watching her with their children, William fell in love with her all over again, seeing new depths of strength and selflessness that humbled him daily. After the children were settled for the night, William and Catherine retreated to their private sitting room, a cozy space filled with family photos and comfortable furniture that bore the gentle wear of years of shared moments. Catherine curled up beside him on the sofa, her head resting against his shoulder as they talked quietly about the weeks ahead. The Christmas carol service loomed large in both of their minds, representing so much more than a simple public appearance. Catherine spoke honestly about her fears, not about her health, which was improving steadily, but about stepping back into the public eye after such an intensely private period of their lives. She worried about her energy levels, about whether she would be able to project the warmth and confidence that people expected from her, and about the inevitable scrutiny that would accompany her return. William listened without trying to minimize her concerns, understanding that she needed to voice these fears before she could work through them. William shared his own perspective, telling Catherine about the genuine concern and affection he had felt from the Welsh audience, the way people had inquired about her health with real tenderness rather than mere curiosity. He described conversations with community leaders who had shared their own stories of family members facing health challenges, creating a tapestry of shared experience that made their situation feel less isolating and more universally human. As they talked deep into the night, William found himself thinking about the evolution of their relationship over the past year. The crisis had stripped away many of the formal protocols that usually surrounded their lives, forcing them to focus on what truly mattered. They had learned to communicate more directly, to ask for help when they needed it, and to find strength in vulnerability rather than always projecting unwavering confidence. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as news coverage of William's Welsh speech dominated the headlines. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising his eloquence, his evident sincerity, and the way he had managed to address themes of resilience and hope without exploiting his family's personal situation. Reading the coverage together over breakfast, William and Catherine felt a sense of validation that their approach of handling the crisis with dignity and grace was resonating with the public. Phone calls poured in from family members, friends, and colleagues, all expressing their admiration for the speech and their excitement about Catherine's upcoming appearance. Each conversation reinforced the sense that there was a groundswell of support building, that people were genuinely eager to welcome Catherine back rather than scrutinize her return with critical eyes. The warmth of these responses helped ease some of Catherine's anxieties, replacing her fears with a growing sense of anticipation. William spent the following days working closely with their team to ensure that every detail of the Christmas carol service would be perfectly orchestrated. He reviewed the seating arrangements, the lighting, the musical selections, and even the specific route Catherine would take as she entered and exited the venue. Nothing was left to chance, not because they were trying to control public perception, but because William wanted Catherine to feel completely supported and prepared for every moment of the experience. The children became increasingly excited as the event approached, understanding that their mother was returning to what they called her princess work but not fully grasping the significance of the moment for the family as a whole. Catherine spent time explaining to them what the service would involve, practicing her wave in the mirror with their daughter and discussing the importance of the charitable causes the event would support with their sons. William found himself thinking often about the broader meaning of Catherine's return to public life. It represented not just her personal recovery, but a kind of renewal for their entire family and their approach to royal duty. The experience had taught them both that authentic connection with people mattered more than perfect execution of protocol, that showing vulnerability could actually strengthen rather than weaken their ability to serve others effectively. As the days passed, William noticed subtle changes in Catherine's demeanor. The apprehension gradually gave way to a quiet confidence, a sense that she was ready to reclaim her role not as someone returning from defeat, but as someone who had learned important lessons about resilience, gratitude, and the preciousness of each opportunity to make a positive difference in the world. The media attention continued to build, but it felt different from the usual royal coverage. There was a gentleness to it, a recognition that this was a significant moment that deserved respect rather than sensationalism. William found himself grateful for the way the press seemed to understand the importance of allowing Catherine to return on her own terms, without pressure or unrealistic expectations. William's Welsh speech had indeed paved the way, creating an atmosphere of support and anticipation that would make Catherine's return feel like a celebration rather than a test. As he watched her prepare for what would be one of the most meaningful appearances of her life, William felt immense pride not just in her courage, but in the way their love had grown stronger and deeper through the most challenging period they had ever faced together. The foundation was laid, the stage was set, and Catherine was ready to step back into the light, carrying with her the strength of her family's love, the support of a nation that had learned to see her not just as a royal figure, but as a symbol of hope and perseverance for anyone facing their own battles. William's words in Wales had been just the beginning of what would become a powerful story of triumph over adversity, love conquering fear, and the way authentic leadership could inspire entire communities to believe in the possibility of healing and renewal. The Westminster Abbey preparations began 3 weeks before the Christmas carol service, transforming the ancient sanctuary into a vision of seasonal beauty that would serve as the perfect backdrop for Catherine's return. William found himself intimately involved in every decision, from the placement of the Christmas trees to the selection of candles that would cast the most flattering light. His attention to detail surprised even the experienced event coordinators who had worked on countless royal occasions, but they quickly understood that this was far more than professional perfectionism driving his involvement. Catherine accompanied William on several site visits, walking slowly through the abbey as they discussed the flow of the service and the positioning of various elements. These quiet moments together in the sacred space felt deeply meaningful, as if they were not just preparing for a public event but engaging in a kind of spiritual preparation for a new chapter in their lives. The abbey's ancient stones seemed to absorb their whispered conversations about hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. The guest list for the service read like a catalogue of people who had touched their lives during the most challenging months they had ever faced. Medical professionals who had provided not just treatment but genuine compassion, friends who had offered practical support without fanfare, and charitable organizations that had continued their vital work while understanding when Catherine needed to step back from her patronage duties. Each invitation felt like a small act of gratitude, a way of acknowledging the community that had sustained them through crisis. William spent hours on the phone with various charitable leaders, discussing how the service could highlight their work without exploiting Catherine's situation for fundraising purposes. The balance was delicate, requiring sensitivity to both the organization's needs and his family's desire to maintain dignity while supporting causes they cared about deeply. These conversations revealed the thoughtful approach that had always characterized Catherine's charitable work, now extended and deepened by William's increased involvement. The children's excitement grew daily as they realized they would play a special role in the service, not just as attendees but as active participants in lighting candles and presenting flowers to some of the honored guests. Catherine worked with them on their small speeches, helping them understand the importance of speaking clearly and making eye contact, skills that would serve them well in their future royal duties but were being learned now in the context of supporting their mother's triumphant return. Media preparation took on an unusually collaborative tone, with William and Catherine's communications team working to ensure that coverage would focus on the charitable purposes of the event rather than solely on Catherine's health journey. William personally spoke with several trusted journalists, not to control their reporting but to provide context that would help them tell the story with the nuance and respect it deserved. These conversations reflected a more mature approach to media relations, born from months of navigating public interest in deeply private matters. The rehearsals began 2 weeks before the service, with Catherine participating in modified versions that allowed her to conserve energy while still preparing thoroughly for the actual event. William watched from the sidelines as she moved through the familiar rhythms of royal protocol, noting how naturally she fell back into the role that had become second nature over the years of their marriage. Her muscle memory for these events was remarkable, requiring only minor adjustments to accommodate her still recovering stamina. During one particularly moving rehearsal, the Abbey Choir performed one of the pieces that would feature prominently in the actual service, a haunting arrangement of a traditional carol that spoke to themes of hope, healing, and new beginnings. Catherine stopped in her tracks as the music filled the ancient space, tears streaming down her face as the beauty of the moment overwhelmed her. William moved quickly to her side, not to comfort her but to share in the emotion, understanding that these tears represented release rather than distress. The week before the service brought an intensity of preparation that reminded William of wedding planning, but with deeper emotional stakes. Every detail mattered not just for its aesthetic impact but for its symbolic meaning. The flowers were chosen for their connection to renewal and growth. The musical selections balanced traditional favorites with newer pieces that spoke to contemporary struggles and triumphs, and even the order of service was crafted to tell a story of journey through darkness toward light. Catherine's dress fittings became collaborative sessions where William, their children, and even close friends weighed in on options that would photograph beautifully while allowing Catherine to feel comfortable and confident throughout the lengthy service. The final selection was elegant but not ostentatious, sophisticated but not intimidating, striking exactly the right balance between royal protocol and personal authenticity that had become Catherine's signature style. William arranged for several private meetings between Catherine and some of the individuals who would be highlighted during the service, people whose own stories of overcoming adversity would resonate with the broader themes of the event. These conversations energized Catherine, reminding her of the broader purpose behind her public role and the way her platform could amplify voices that might otherwise go unheard. The meetings also provided natural opportunities for her to practice the kind of engaged, empathetic interaction that made her such an effective royal representative. The technical rehearsals revealed the incredible complexity involved in orchestrating an event that would be viewed by millions while maintaining the intimate, sacred atmosphere that would make it meaningful for those in attendance. William marveled at the expertise of the production team, but he also insisted on multiple backup plans for any scenario that might require Catherine to modify her participation. Every contingency was considered, not out of pessimism about her health but out of determination that nothing would diminish the power of her return. 3 days before the service, William and Catherine had dinner alone together for the first time in weeks, their conversation flowing from practical details about the upcoming event to deeper reflections on how their priorities had shifted over the past year. They talked about their children's growing maturity, evident in their understanding that their mother had been fighting a serious illness while maintaining her love and attention for them. They discussed their own relationship, acknowledging how the crisis had strengthened their partnership while also creating new challenges they were still learning to navigate. Catherine spoke about her evolving understanding of her public role, how the experience of vulnerability had given her new insights into the people she met during official engagements who were facing their own health struggles or family crises. She felt more equipped now to offer genuine empathy rather than just polite sympathy, having lived through the uncertainty, fear, and hope that characterized serious illness and recovery. This authenticity, William believed, would make her more effective in her royal duties than ever before. The final preparations took place in an atmosphere of quiet confidence rather than nervous energy. William found himself less anxious than he had expected, trusting in Catherine's strength, the thorough planning they had undertaken, and the genuine support they felt from both their immediate circle and the broader public. The Welsh speech had indeed created the perfect foundation, generating an outpouring of affection and anticipation that would welcome Catherine back with warmth rather than scrutiny. As they prepared for bed the night before the service, William and Catherine stood together at their bedroom window, looking out at the London skyline and thinking about the thousands of people who would gather the next day to participate in what had become much more than a Christmas carol service. It had evolved into a celebration of resilience, a demonstration of the power of community support, and a testament to the way authentic leadership could inspire hope even in the darkest circumstances. Tomorrow would mark not just Catherine's return to public life, but the beginning of a new chapter in their story as a family dedicated to service, strengthened by adversity, and committed to using their platform to make a meaningful difference in the world. The morning of the Christmas carol service dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of December light that made London's ancient buildings glow like jewels against the winter sky. William woke early, as he always did on important days, and spent a few quiet minutes watching Catherine sleep peacefully beside him. The serenity on her face filled him with confidence that today would unfold exactly as they had hoped, a celebration of recovery, renewal, and the enduring power of love to overcome even the most daunting challenges. Catherine stirred as the first rays of sunlight filtered through their bedroom curtains, her eyes opening to meet William's gaze with a smile that held no trace of the anxiety that had characterized the weeks leading up to this moment. They had breakfast together with their children, the conversation light and playful, with the youngsters more excited about seeing their mother do her princess work than concerned about the significance of the occasion. Their innocent enthusiasm provided the perfect emotional balance for what could have been an overwhelming morning. The preparation ritual began with Catherine's hair and makeup team, professionals who had worked with her for years and understood instinctively how to enhance her natural beauty while ensuring she would look radiant under the challenging lighting conditions of Westminster Abbey. William stayed nearby, offering quiet encouragement and helping to maintain the calm, positive atmosphere that would set the tone for the entire day. His presence seemed to steady everyone, from the styling team to their security detail, creating a sense that this was a celebration rather than a trial. As Catherine's transformation progressed, William found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The months of treatment had stripped away many of the superficial aspects of their public roles, forcing them to focus on what truly mattered and teaching them that authenticity was far more powerful than perfection. Today's service would reflect that evolution, presenting Catherine not as an untouchable royal figure but as a real woman who had faced real challenges and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more determined to use her platform for meaningful purposes. The children were dressed in their finest clothes, each one carefully instructed on their role in the service but also reminded that the most important thing was simply to support their mother with their presence and their love. William watched with pride as they practiced their small parts one final time, noting how naturally they had absorbed the lessons about service, dignity, and compassion that he and Catherine had been teaching them, often more through example than through words. The journey to Westminster Abbey provided a preview of the warmth that awaited them, with crowds lining the streets despite the chilly morning air. People held signs of support and encouragement, many featuring messages that specifically referenced Catherine's health journey and their admiration for her courage. Children waved from their parents' shoulders, elderly couples applauded from behind barriers, and young adults held up phones to capture what they understood was a historic moment in the modern royal story. William held Catherine's hand throughout the drive, feeling the subtle changes in her grip that told him she was processing the enormity of the moment while maintaining her outward composure. They had agreed beforehand that she should acknowledge her emotions rather than suppress them, understanding that any tears or visible feeling would only enhance the authenticity that had become her greatest strength. The public wanted to see the real Catherine, not a perfectly composed royal automaton. Westminster Abbey had been transformed into a winter wonderland that managed to be both spectacular and tasteful, with thousands of candles creating pools of warm light throughout the ancient space. The Christmas trees were positioned to frame key moments in the service, their simple white lights complementing rather than competing with the Abbey's Gothic grandeur. Every detail reflected the careful balance between celebration and reverence that William and Catherine had insisted upon throughout the planning process. The guest list represented a cross-section of British society, from members of the royal family to representatives of the charitable organizations that would benefit from the service's donations. Medical professionals who had treated Catherine sat beside celebrities who had supported their causes, while families who had been helped by the featured charities mixed with government officials and religious leaders. The diversity of the congregation reflected the inclusive approach that had always characterized Catherine's public work. As they arrived at the Abbey, William stepped out first, turning immediately to assist Catherine from the car with a gesture that was both protective and respectful. The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming, a sustained burst of applause and cheering that seemed to surprise Catherine with its warmth and intensity. She paused for a moment, clearly moved by the reception, before beginning the walk toward the Abbey entrance with the confident grace that had made her such a beloved public figure. The processional through the Abbey was choreographed to allow Catherine time to greet various representatives of the organizations being honored, each interaction brief but meaningful. William watched from nearby as she spoke with a nurse who had worked on the cancer ward where she had received treatment, a conversation that brought tears to both women's eyes and demonstrated the genuine connections that made Catherine's public work so much more than ceremonial obligation. The service itself unfolded like a carefully crafted piece of music, with each element building toward moments of genuine emotional impact. Catherine's reading from the Gospel was delivered with a clarity and conviction that reflected her deepened understanding of hope and faith through adversity. Her voice carried throughout the Abbey without amplification, trained through years of public speaking but given new depth by recent experience of vulnerability and recovery. William's own participation in the service was deliberately understated, his role focused on supporting Catherine while allowing her to be the clear center of attention. He watched with pride as she moved through the familiar rhythms of royal protocol while infusing each gesture with personal meaning. Her interactions with the children's choir, her presentation of awards to outstanding volunteers, and her lighting of the memorial candle for those lost to illness all carried authentic emotional weight that transcended mere ceremony. The musical selections proved particularly powerful, with several pieces chosen specifically for their relevance to themes of healing and renewal. When the full choir and orchestra performed a specially commissioned arrangement of Silent Night that incorporated traditional Welsh harmonies as a tribute to William's recent speech, the symbolism was clear and deeply moving. The connection between his words in Wales and this moment of Catherine's return created a narrative of support and love that resonated throughout the Abbey. The most emotional moment came when Catherine presented a special recognition to a young cancer survivor who had become an advocate for pediatric research. Their embrace lasted longer than protocol might typically allow, but no one in the Abbey minded the departure from formality. It was clear that Catherine was seeing something of her own journey reflected in this young person's courage, and her genuine emotion made the moment authentic and powerful rather than staged or manipulative. As the service moved toward its conclusion, William could see the toll that the extended public appearance was taking on Catherine's still recovering stamina, but he could also see her determination to complete every element with the same grace and attention that characterized all of her public work. Her strength in those final moments, drawing on reserves of energy fueled by love and purpose, reminded him once again why he had fallen in love with her and why she would be such a remarkable queen when their time came to assume the throne. The final hymn was sung by the entire congregation, 1,500 voices joining together in O Come, All Ye Faithful, while Catherine stood with her family, surrounded by candlelight and filled with gratitude for the support that had sustained them through their darkest hours. Looking around the abbey at the faces illuminated by candlelight, William saw not just an audience but a community, people who had invested emotionally in their family's journey and were now sharing in the joy of this moment of triumph and renewal. The final notes of the closing hymn faded into the vaulted ceiling of Westminster Abbey, leaving behind a profound silence that seemed to hold the collective breath of everyone present. Catherine stood bathed in candlelight, her face radiant with a mixture of exhaustion and triumph that spoke to the magnitude of what she had just accomplished. William moved closer to her side, not to offer support but to share in a moment that would forever mark their transition from a period of uncertainty into a new chapter of hope and renewed purpose. The processional out of the abbey moved slowly, allowing Catherine time to acknowledge the sustained applause that followed their progress down the ancient aisle. William noticed how she made eye contact with individual faces in the crowd, particularly those belonging to the medical professionals and charitable workers who had been part of their journey over the past months. These were not the perfunctory acknowledgments of typical royal protocol, but genuine moments of connection and gratitude that transformed a formal ceremony into something deeply personal. Outside the abbey, the December evening had settled into that magical hour when London's streetlights begin to compete with the fading daylight, creating an atmosphere that seemed designed specifically for this moment of celebration. The crowds that had gathered were larger than anyone had anticipated, with people who had clearly come not just to witness a royal appearance but to participate in what they understood was a significant moment of recovery and renewal for a family they had grown to love. Catherine's brief speech on the abbey steps was unscripted, flowing from her heart rather than from prepared remarks. She spoke about gratitude, about the power of community support, and about the way adversity could reveal the very best in human nature. Her words were simple but profound, carrying the authenticity that could only come from someone who had lived through genuine struggle and emerged with a deeper appreciation for life's gifts. William watched the crowd's reaction, seeing tears on many faces and understanding that Catherine's vulnerability had created a connection far more powerful than any perfectly crafted royal address. The drive home provided their first private moment since the morning, and Catherine's exhaustion was now visible in a way she had not allowed during the public portions of the day. But it was the exhaustion of achievement rather than defeat, the pleasant tiredness that comes after completing something meaningful and challenging. She leaned against William's shoulder, and he could feel some of the tension that had been building for weeks finally beginning to release. Their children had performed beautifully throughout the service, displaying a poise and natural grace that made both parents proud while maintaining the infectious enthusiasm that kept the occasion from becoming too solemn or formal. During the car ride home, they chattered excitedly about the music, the decorations, and the important people they had met, processing the experience with the resilience and adaptability that had characterized their response to their mother's illness throughout the previous months. The evening brought a steady stream of phone calls and messages from family members, friends, and colleagues around the world, all expressing their admiration for Catherine's strength and the dignity with which she had handled her return to public life. Each conversation reinforced the sense that the service had achieved its goals, not just in terms of raising funds for important causes but in demonstrating that authenticity and vulnerability could actually strengthen rather than weaken public leadership. Media coverage of the event was overwhelmingly positive, with commentators praising Catherine's grace and William's supportive presence while focusing appropriately on the charitable purposes that had motivated the service. The response represented a more mature relationship between the royal family and the press, built on mutual respect and a shared understanding that some stories deserved to be told with particular care and sensitivity. In the days following the service, letters and cards began arriving by the thousands, many from people sharing their own stories of health struggles, family challenges, and the inspiration they had drawn from Catherine's example of facing adversity with dignity and hope. Reading these messages together, William and Catherine were struck by the way their personal journey had resonated with people dealing with their own difficulties, creating connections that went far beyond the traditional boundaries of royal public relationships. The charitable impact of the service exceeded all expectations, with donations flowing in not just from those who had attended but from viewers around the world who had been moved by the television coverage. More importantly, several of the featured organizations reported significant increases in volunteer applications and community support, suggesting that the service had achieved its deeper goal of inspiring people to take action rather than simply feel sympathy. Christmas Day itself was celebrated quietly at home, with Catherine finally able to fully relax and enjoy the holiday without the weight of preparation and anticipation that had characterized the previous weeks. William watched her playing with their children around the Christmas tree, noting how the joy in her laughter had returned to its full depth and richness. The gifts they exchanged were modest but meaningful, each one chosen to commemorate their journey through the challenging months and their gratitude for the support that had sustained them. As the new year approached, William found himself reflecting on the profound changes that the previous 12 months had brought to their family and their understanding of their public roles. The crisis had stripped away many illusions about control and certainty, but it had also revealed strengths they had not known they possessed and connections they had not fully appreciated. Catherine's illness had been devastating, but her recovery had become a source of inspiration not just for their family but for countless others facing their own battles. The success of the Christmas Carol service established a new template for their public work, one that emphasized authenticity over perfection, community connection over formal protocol, and meaningful impact over ceremonial obligation. William began to envision how they might apply these lessons to future engagements, creating opportunities for genuine interaction and mutual support rather than one-sided displays of royal presence. Catherine's stamina continued to improve throughout the winter months, allowing her to gradually resume more of her normal activities while maintaining the careful balance between public duty and personal wellness that her recovery required. Each new engagement was approached thoughtfully, with realistic expectations and appropriate support systems in place, but also with the confidence that came from having successfully navigated the most challenging period of their lives together. The anniversary of Catherine's diagnosis arrived quietly, marked not with sadness but with gratitude for how far they had traveled and how much they had learned about love, resilience, and the power of community support. William arranged for a private celebration at home, not of the illness itself but of the growth and deepened understanding that had emerged from their response to it. They planted a tree in their garden, a living symbol of renewal and hope that would grow stronger with each passing year. Looking toward the future, William felt a sense of optimism that was more grounded and realistic than anything he had experienced before the crisis. He understood now that challenges would always arise, but he also knew that their family possessed the love, strength, and community support necessary to face whatever might come their way. Catherine's recovery had become more than a personal victory, it had evolved into a testament to the power of hope, the importance of authentic relationships, and the way that vulnerability could become a source of strength rather than weakness. The Christmas Carol service had indeed marked Catherine's triumphant return to public life, but, more than that, it had celebrated the transformation of their entire approach to royal service. William's Welsh speech had paved the way by creating an atmosphere of support and anticipation, but Catherine's grace and authenticity during her return had established a new standard for what meaningful public leadership could look like in the modern world. Together, they had turned their greatest challenge into their most powerful source of connection with the people they served, proving that sometimes the most profound victories emerge not from avoiding struggle but from facing it with dignity, love, and unwavering commitment to the values that matter most.